AAT Birds Weekly Report is the Eagle news, notes, and analysis you need.
Quick, he's going to go. What a give it to Smith, and they stop him again. Go back. He looks, fires for the end zone, intercepted, the 20, the 10, the 5, touchdown, Matt Ware, Matt Ware, midfield, he's at the 40, he's going to go, Deshaun Jackson. He steps up, he's hit, and falls forward, and he fumbles the football, and the Eagles have it, it's one, and the Eagles win.
It's all birds, all the time.
And welcome to another edition of the AAT Birds Weekly Report. Unfortunately, it is a somber AAT Birds Weekly Report because
it's not somber.
No more.
Somber implies that. Somber implies that it was a surprise that we're depressed about it.
Yeah, I wouldn't say. I think the only thing that we're kind of, maybe some people are happy it's over. Honestly, the misery, let the misery end, and hopefully you regroup and get into next year. Unfortunately, the Eagles did lose the wild card game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 32-9. It was a pretty dreadful performance, offensively and especially defensively, which we've been seeing for a handful of weeks now. And it was basically like I was telling you before we started, they were delaying the inevitable. Honestly, if they were to somehow have came away with a win, they would have been delaying the inevitable because they just didn't play like a good football team. And, there's a lot of questions. There's a lot of, hopefully we get some answers soon. But yeah, the Eagles just, I don't know. They didn't look good at all.
All right, so let's pull the Band-Aid off. Okay. At no point this season did the Eagles look like a team on the verge of a Super Bowl. At no point this season did the Eagles put together a comprehensive 60-minute game plan. At no point this season did the Eagles finally figure it out. And every single time that anybody went to the podium to say, hey, we got things to work on. Hey, we got things to figure out. This is a learning moment for us. They didn't learn anything. And they got drastically worse as the season progressed. And what happens is NFL teams make adjustments as things go wrong. This team, the only adjustments they made were poor adjustments. And you look at this playoff game specifically, they clearly had no game plan because all week long, every person who talked about these two teams said what was going to happen is Todd Bowles was going to blitz. Todd Bowles was going to blitz. Todd Bowles is going to blitz. And what did he do? He blitzed. And the amount of uncovered blitzes that got to Jalen Hurts were absurd. So the one most successful play was a slant, a quick slant to Devontae Smith. They did not run that play again the rest of the game. Yeah. Instead, they went to 3rd and 2, left the middle of the field unbelievably open where you could park a bus in the middle of the field. There weren't even receivers there, so the defenders had to just guard the outsides. The team looked abysmal. They forgot how to tackle, which is peewee football skills. This team didn't deserve to be in the playoffs with the epic collapse of the last 2 months. They somehow got to 11 wins. If you had told me a team that starts 10-1 would not reach 12 wins, I would have been shocked. This team deserved to lose this game with the game plan that they put out there. And I'm not pulling any punches. It was garbage.
Yeah. Listen, it was
very, very nicely. I'm not saying things nicely.
Listen, it was very, very frustrating. I think a lot of it has to do with, listen, you have a quarterback in Jalen Hurts that can make plays. I get that. But I feel like at times, especially late in this season, it was like, go ahead, make a play because, there's no real answer. Because if you're in zero, basically it's a zero blitz comes at you and you have nobody there to help block you. You're 5 against 6 and you just, what are you expecting Jalen to make somebody miss, to roll out, to then hopefully find somebody? It's just, there's too much of that. And my one thing, and we'll get into this, talking about Nick Sirianni and everything that's been reported. Diana Rossini. There was also another one just 6 minutes ago. I'll bring up. We'll talk about too. But my big thing about it is people saying that everyone has to go. Really me thinking into it. So this is the way that I'm thinking about this. Early this season, the Buffalo Bills were 6-6, and before they played us, they had a bye week, and then before that bye week, they made a coaching change, and they fired Ken Dorsey, and Joe Brady was now the offensive coordinator. Then Buffalo went on a run. They wound up winning their division, got the 2 seed. The one thing that they started doing, yes, Josh Allen made plays. Yes, he was, focal point of the offense, but it wasn't Josh Allen having to go out there and be the hero and win it all. Like, they focused on the run game. James Cook, I think he was top 5 in the NFL in rushing yards. They used James Cook. They used different things in their offense. Stephon Diggs, his numbers weren't great, but they used him a little differently. And I think that's something when you look into this offseason with the Eagles looking for a potential new offensive coordinator to be able to work with Sirianni, everything along the lines of that, which has to be somebody not from Sirianni's tree or anyone he's familiar with, in my opinion. I think he needs to with a fresh mind, fresh perspective, something along the lines of that.
Okay. Listen to me.
Use the
once again. And I understand the Eagles were playing down a large portion of the game. You were without A.J. Brown.
Yeah. And then
you had DeAndre Swift carry the ball 10 times.
Yeah.
Let me say that again. You were without your number one stud receiver. You were struggling to complete passes. You were struggling to move the ball. And you gave your number one Pro Bowl running back the ball 10 times. They only called 15 run plays. This is a team that the foundation of it is based around running the football. You have the strongest offensive line in football who was unable to stop the run or who was unable to stop the blitz. So what do? You send draw plays up the middle and you get huge gains. They didn't make that adjustment. And instead, Cam Jurgens had one of the worst games I had ever seen him play. Jordan Mailata had a terrible game. Jason Kelce, I love the guy. The whole offensive line had a bad game because they were not set in a position to win. And what is the telltale sign for me is everybody knew that they were blitzing. And they didn't hide it at the line of scrimmage. Yet still, the solution is to chuck the ball 20 yards downfield along the sideline where there's 2 wide receivers running and 7 defenders.
Well, I think
safety, they blitzed 4.
But I think you also have to put it this way too. When it's 3rd and 2 and you're throwing the ball 20, 30 yards down the field.
Yeah.
And it was a few occasions. They were 0 for 11 on 3rd down, and it was all passes.
And that's it. And that's another thing, right? They were 0 for 11, and it was all passes. And you look at the forcing the ball to Devontae Smith. And yes, Devontae Smith had a phenomenal game. He was the only one who really came out to play. But it was also very evident that was the only place that Jalen Hurts was looking. He did not go enough to Dallas Goedert. He did not go enough to Julio Jones while he had the opportunity. He did not. I mean, he went honestly too much to Quez Watkins and Olamide Zaccheaus. But he was forcing the ball, absolutely flat out forcing the ball to Devontae Smith.
Yeah. And like I said, this is where I think a, philosophical change. Is that how you say it? I think that's what I think.
A change in philosophy is a philosophical change.
Yeah. They need or an easier word, scheme change. They need something scheme wise in terms of offensively. Like, they were the least motion team in the NFL. Now, I know motion, sometimes it's just hogwash, everything like that. But if you can scheme receivers open and not just have to focus on AJ and Devontae beating their guy or being able to make a spectacular catch over the defender, just take a look at teams.
They should be able to do that every once in a while. Should be able to chuck it up and have your all-pro wide receivers do what they need to do. But for you to run basic route trees that you learn in Pee Wee football and never adapt it is unreasonable in the NFL.
Listen, when you're trying to get explosive plays by manufacturing it yourself and not really letting the offense be able to dictate the explosive plays. Listen, when you look at explosive plays or explosives, when you look at that on the offensive side of the ball, the thing is you need to run the ball because you can use the play action, the RPO or whatever they want to call it, to be able to get the defenders to bite. If you're not doing that and you're just, one-on-one with these guys or the safety over the top, we saw it in Seattle. The safety over the top gets 2 interceptions.
And if you are going to abandon the run game, right, which they did, and it wasn't before. I mean, yes, they were behind, but even before they were behind, they had abandoned the run game. They abandoned the run game in the first half.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're going to do that and you're going to allow pressure from 4 and 5 man rushes, you have no ability to do truly anything.
Yeah. No, it's just listen, I think also when you look at Jalen and the Eagles offensively, listen, last year going this offseason, going into this year, the Baltimore Ravens made a decision and they went with Todd Monken as their offensive coordinator. And, they changed philosophies because the offense isn't run like it was with Greg Roman. It is a totally different offense.
And that's okay to make adjustments.
Yeah. And listen, it's successful. And they were the number 1 seed in the AFC. Lamar's probably going to win the MVP
and should.
Listen, you should be able, you can do that. And this is where when people are saying with Sirianni, and then this can transition into the reports and everything recently on Sirianni the last basically couple hours. So when you look at the, head coaches in the NFL here. So when people are saying, oh, what Sirianni's supposed to be this offensive genius, or offensive minded head coach, why is he looking for an offensive coordinator? What, I get that. But also as a head coach, you have more than a job to just be the offensive minded head coach. You are a leader of the
game
team.
manager.
Yeah. And listen, you have guys like John Harbaugh and Dan Campbell. Listen, these guys don't call the offense or whatever. They're leaders of their teams. And that's why you're going to see the Detroit Lions are probably going to lose their offensive coordinator to a head coaching job.
Yeah.
And then
most likely he's going to be the coach of the Commanders.
Yeah. So let's see what happens, in Detroit then try to find something. So listen, that does happen. I understand that people are like, yeah, but then you're going to lose your offensive coordinator all the time. But if this offensive coordinator comes in and we put in philosophy of his certain offenses, then you can grasp that towards it. Listen, it's all right. So you can take from different people.
I hear what you're saying. I don't necessarily agree with what you're saying because specifically this year, you look, I feel like I keep bringing this up. You listen back to Nick Sirianni's original press conferences, and he said, we are not going to have schemes. We're going to, and then put players and force them to commit to our scheme. We are going to find out what our players do well and build a scheme around them. He had said that since day one. And you saw what happens with Jonathan Gannon, who not a great defensive coordinator, but you know what? He beat us. But more importantly, you saw what happened with Shane Steichen. Shane Steichen did a phenomenal job getting the best out of these players. And that's why when he got to the Colts, he almost got the Colts into the playoffs. Ben Johnson has been in the NFL for 3 years. Not Ben Johnson. I'm sorry. Brian Johnson has been in the NFL for 3 years. He got the job largely because he coached Jalen Hurts in college or whatever the connection was.
Well, that's how he got the quarterback's coach.
Unprepared for the job. He was unprepared for the job he was given.
The biggest problem here was at the end of the season, usually the way the head coaching cycles went in previous seasons, in previous years, by the time a team was in the Super Bowl, all the head coaching spots were filled up. And But now you're starting to see teams are filling their teams a lot later, which means Super Bowl teams get picked. There's not many options. And for the Eagles, the best option, listen, you had a heck of a season. Your quarterback had, an MVP caliber season.
A heck of a season because of Shane Steichen's play calling, not because of Brian Johnson and the great work he did with Jalen Hurts. Yes, that certainly helped.
But it's an easy promotion.
Brian Johnson know about offensive play calling? Because clearly, if you look at the scheme that was established, it's not much. It's not much. And then you start to hear all the reports coming out. We don't know who is putting these plays in, if they're coming from Sirianni, if they're coming from Brian Johnson. It's a bigger problem to me is if Brian Johnson's the play caller and Nick Sirianni is undermining him.
Yeah, I don't.
Because if you have that problem, just get rid of Brian Johnson, much like you did with Sean Desai. If you have an issue, replace him totally. But the end of the season, and we haven't even touched on the defensive side of the ball, other than they can't tackle. If you look at the defensive side of the ball, making that switch from Desai to Patricia confused our defense and made them susceptible to literally every play. The one play before the snap, Baker Mayfield goes, "Chris, it's coming to you." Says it loud on the camera. And takes a 2-step drop and just chucks it up there. Doesn't read the defense, just chucks it up there. And Chris Godwin goes and makes a play and embarrasses Avonte Maddox.
Yeah.
What is that defensive scheme?
The defense, absolutely abysmal. And, I know Brandon Graham talked a little bit about it. Like Desai and Patricia, they don't call the same type of defenses, but they have similar terminology. When you have similar terminology, but they mean totally different things, that isn't a recipe for any type of success. Because if you're replacing a guy, you're replacing a guy with Patricia who run totally different schemes in the middle of the season. Like offensively, I think it's a little bit different than defensively when you change people. But the problem is these guys had to relearn. They had to learn all this stuff, and they just out of position is one thing, and then they just weren't tackling.
And embarrassing is another.
And they were a bad tackling team early in the year. It just caught up with them.
Yeah.
And, that's another thing that BG talked about. And I think yesterday when he was on the radio, he talked about it caught up with us. And they said, well, what do you mean? What caught up with you? And he goes, the tackling.
But if you have a veteran-based team that can't tackle, that's a problem. If you have a veteran-based team that cannot do the basic of football, which is tackling, that's an issue.
But also when you have a team that is filled with 30-plus-year-old players, that's
also true.
It's also not a recipe for success always. If you have these guys, you need some younger players.
We got some really awesome comments rolling in. I want to pause kind of what we're doing on our venting session and roll through them. So I feel like if some of these guys are from various Facebook chats and group chats that I have, I'm pretty sure that this is Carl. Carl is somebody who is not the biggest Jalen Hurts fan. And in one of my group chats, him and Max kind of go at it. But yeah, I mean, the big thing is, that Jalen Hurts once squatted 600 pounds in college. Yeah, I mean, I think that the focus was on a lot of the wrong stuff this year, and we've kind of gotten into that. Mark Mednick commenting, and I know I'm still angry, but they need to start at the top. Sirianni lost and their OCs are terrible. Yes, and we've touched on that. And the fact of the matter is, one other thing that Nick Sirianni, the head coach, says is, my fingerprints are on everything. If you have a problem, blame it on me. Well, Sirianni definitely lost, and that team was uncompetitive, right? They had no run game, terrible play calling. Again, yeah. None of the game we played, we ever made for Christmas, need to make receipts. Yeah. Our defensive coordinators suck. Again, we know that. A head coach who is nothing without a great OC should not be a head coach. I don't necessarily agree with that. You do need strong game managers, Max. But at the same time, you need a strong offensive coordinator as well. So when they end up, again, things have come out that, we're probably not going to get rid of Nick Sirianni this year. And I don't think that we should, but you do need to put in place a strong offensive coordinator with head coaching experience, because Nick Sirianni is going to start this season on the hot seat, as well he should. And when he does, you need to have somebody available to take over that, can do that. Yeah. I refuse to sit here and say Sirianni is a better option than Vrabel. We could talk about Vrabel. We can talk about Pete Carroll. My wife putting up comments saying accountability is big Nick energy. Yeah, we need some accountability, 100%. Yes. Sirianni allowed it to happen. McCarthy returning to Dallas. I think that's a joke. I think that's an absolute joke. And I can't wait to go on an NFC East podcast and talk about that, because there's no way that he should be still involved there. But you know what? He is. I think the thing for me is, Nick Sirianni has been the coach of the Eagles for 3 years. In year one, he overachieved and got them into the playoffs. They shouldn't have been a playoff team, but Jalen Hurts really kind of spearheaded that. And they committed to the run game and they did the right things. Last year, they made it to a Super Bowl. Again, overachieving. I don't think that they were quite ready for a Super Bowl run. But again, they're there. This year, they overachieved in the beginning of the season by winning those 10 games, being the last undefeated team. And then you start to see the wheels come off as teams made adjustment, as more defensive, physical teams made an adjustment. He made the playoffs in 3 seasons. He has a Super Bowl appearance. I truly do not think that Nick Sirianni should be fired. Everybody around him should be fired. Which kind of leads to this point, Max saying, how many weeks is he given? What's the focal point? Just winning, or does he have to beat these teams up to keep his job? I think we all know early in the season there was a problem regardless of being 10-1. Max, for me, I think it's the eye test. You saw a team fall completely flat over the last 2 months of the season and straight up not even be competitive. So for me, it's the eye test. If he goes a couple weeks into next season and the team is not competitive, I think then he gets the axe. If they're winning games and they're doing the right thing and they're playing decent football, he can stick around. But if this team comes out and is still not competitive, it will be Sirianni's time to go.
Yeah, you can't expect them to go 10-1 again next season.
No.
The eye test is going to be there, seeing how this team reacts, seeing how this team plays. You want them to be successful early in the season, but if they come out 2-5, 3-6, that's not going to be very good. It's going to get very, very, very loud. And
it's loud now.
Oh,
it's loud now. Max saying, I just feel like Lurie doesn't fire coach midseason. The only guy I recall it happening to is Chip Kelly, and that was with a week left. Yeah. And, we're all saying that, Sirianni's back and again that he should be, but he hasn't actually met because of things happening today. He has not actually met with Jeffrey Lurie.
And this is where I bring this up. So Diana Rossini's been putting out a couple tweets in the recent couple hours. This was the most recent one, 9:23 p.m. Nick Sirianni will meet with owner Jeffrey Lurie and will be expected to have a plan for how he's going to improve the Eagles. This will include a pitch on potential new coordinators and assistant coaches per sources. This is why coaches around the league have been contacted. So, that's why her original tweet was that, Eagles and Nick Sirianni and Howie Roseman have been contacting coaches and coaches' agents across the league to, I guess, put a plan in place on who they would have to replace some of these coaches. And that's kind of what Nick Sirianni has to pose to Jeffrey Lurie to be able to, keep his job, if you want to put it that way. Because, listen, you can't go the Doug Peterson way. I guess is what I'm kind of getting to here. Now,
you
Doug
can't
Peterson
double down and say that Press Taylor's the guy.
Yeah, which he's in Jacksonville, by the way.
And guess what? They didn't make the playoffs this year. He's still not the guy.
Yeah. So the plan is he's willing to change. Is he willing to do so? This is where it's going to get interesting in the next, probably say 24 to 48 hours after he meets with Jeffrey Lurie.
So let me ask you a question, because as some of this has come up, I've wanted to kind of touch base on this. So Brian Johnson allegedly has been getting interviews for head coaching jobs. Mm-hmm. I am of the belief that it is to fulfill the Rooney Rule requirements, just because, again, I don't think that Brian Johnson has put enough on paper to show that he is ready to be an NFL coach. But that's neither here nor there.
But again, you didn't know Nick Sirianni was going to get a head coaching job.
No. But again, he did. My question is, are they holding off on firing Brian Johnson and Sean Desai / Matt Patricia because if they fire them, they don't get recomped by the teams that end up hiring them?
Well, Patricia isn't going to get no comp
No,
for anything.
Patricia's not getting anything, but you understand my question.
No, I know, Jake, because if Brian Johnson does get a head coaching job, the Eagles would get 2 third-round picks.
If he's still on the roster, but if they fire him today and then he gets hired, we don't have to get anything.
Yeah, they're probably not going to fire him knowing he's been interviewing for head coaching jobs. The only way that they'd fire him, if they don't demote him, the only way they'd fire him would be if all the head coaching jobs are filled, and then he probably would get the boot.
Okay.
You don't want to fire somebody because then if he gets hired, you don't get those 2 compensatory picks.
Right, and that was my questioning.
Yeah. Now, again, he's still under contract, so even if they hire somebody, he's still, under contract, and they don't have to label it as the offensive coordinator.
Right. He's not Brian Johnson, offensive coordinator. They can put him with a different title. Now, example, Juan Castillo.
Yeah. Listen, it's
we're hurting our feelings.
When I'm like, I get the offensive side of the ball, and I understand that. My biggest focus and what I'm interested to see what they do is defensively. What kind of defensive coordinator are they going to be interviewing? What kind of a defensive coordinator do they want? Are they going to do a scheme type of change? Let the defensive coordinator run the defense. That's going to be what I think is going to be interesting. And, there's plenty of names out there.
Max, oof.
Do they go with the veteran voice? Like, I know you, but Ron Rivera or Leslie Frazier? Do they go with a Wink Martindale?
Go out and get Wink Martindale. Go. So I think the best bet is
like a Mike Vrabel. Listen, if Mike Vrabel doesn't get a head coaching job.
But see, that's my concern. So I think for me, I would rather go out and get a guy like Wink Martindale, somebody who doesn't want to be a head coach, right? Does not want to go out and be a head coach, wants to be a coordinator, because one thing that will prevent you from losing your coordinators every year is getting a guy who goes, this is what I want to do. Right? Jeff Stoutland has never interviewed for a head coaching job.
It's what Andy did with Steve Spagnuolo.
Yeah.
He knows he's not going to get he's not going to leave for a head coaching job
because he's already had that and failed miserably.
Yeah. Listen,
yeah, Eric, you were wrong, buddy. I was not. I unfortunately, I kind of I read the cards. I wanted to be wrong about the Eagles losing. But it was there. It was obvious.
But listen, it's going to be interesting the next 20, 48 hours, what happens. And, next week, we're probably going to have a more clear, definitive way of where the head coach is going to be, because he's either going to be here or not. And then what I'm thinking is next week, you and I will discuss some offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator candidates. If they hire anyone within the week, then we can always discuss that, but it's going to be a fun little off season.
No, it's not. It's going to be miserable. It's going to be very loud.
No, listen, I like this. I like the off season because I like the fact of not knowing who's going to be on the roster, what kind of free agents are out there, the draft, trades, all that kind of stuff really intrigues me and interests me because I always like the roster building aspect of the off season. It's very, very fun when you look at, available free agents from every team, and, Over the Cap does a really great job at, displaying that.
Speaking of Over the Cap, Johnny, will you please do the Bradbury breakdown real quick?
So Bradbury, you can trade him after June 1st. I don't think that's an option.
Nobody wants him.
Unless you keep him on the team until before training camp and trade him then after OTAs and stuff. Okay. But the value is not going to be there. So the only option would be you can release him as early as, when this league year opens in March. You can cut him and designate it as a post June 1st cut. But the thing with that is you eat $4.3 million, comes off your cap, and you get no relief. That's basically the best option. Because if you don't do that and you just flat out cut him, you will eat $10 million of the cap for this year, which you don't want to eat $10 million when you have a defense to rebuild. And that's the biggest thing, because if you do that this year and next year, you literally eat up 13 million, 10 or 14 million, 11, million this year and $3 million next year, and then you get $13 million of cap relief in 26. But if you post June 1st you get no money, like I mentioned, but you get $4.7 million freed up 25 and $17.9 million freed up in 26. And then of course you still have the dead cap hits of 3.1 million and 1.5 million, the 27 and 28. So I think post June 1st cut is the option that is going to be taken.
He was really bad. I mean, it was,
unfortunately,
it was abysmal.
He's a great guy. He's very, nice person, but he always, is there to talk and stuff like that. But listen, it's just, unfortunately, he lost a step, and that step was monumental when you look at coverage and everything. And listen, the Eagles drafted Kealy Ringo, a young corner. They have Eli Ricks. Maybe they want to go the young route. Plus also Isaiah Rodgers. Hopefully he gets reinstated, which he will. A 26-year-old corner. There are options there. And I think letting Bradbury find another team possibly, or his next journey in life, unfortunately, I don't think it's going to be with the Eagles in 2024.
And, you mentioned that you really enjoy the offseason as far as, watching them build a roster kind of from scratch. As I've mentioned on tons of shows by this point, I also enjoy the offseason as far as kind of judging how I think they're going to be. So I have to look at the roster as it stands right now, and then I will look at it on opening day, and that's how I judge this offseason. So right now there's a lot of free agents that we are going to be sending on their way. We've got an aging roster that some decisions are going to be made out of, we can't just be sentimental anymore about certain players. Yes,
listen,
Max, absolutely.
And the sentimental
Jeremiah
thing.
Trotter Jr., yes.
Yeah, Trotter Jr., I'd love to see that. The sentimental thing, talking, we didn't really get into the Jason Kelce thing because on his podcast, he did say he hasn't really made a definitive thing yet. Until it's officially official, that's when we'll really talk about it. I think that's the best thing to do when it comes to something like that. Plus also it gives us something to talk about coming into the offseason, because there's going to be, we have how many months now? We have
April.
8 months until
too far away.
Until the season starts again, basically. A little less than 8 months. So,
and I just, for me, one thing that I will say is, if Howie Roseman does not reprioritize
linebacker and safety,
certain positions, specifically linebackers, this offseason, quite honestly, I don't really care what else we do. We've seen him rebuild the offensive line. We've seen him rebuild wide receivers. We've seen him rebuild the defensive line. We've seen him put special teams in play. We've seen. We have not seen him really commit to the linebacking core. If he does not do that this offseason, I'm going to consider it a failure, because we saw what plug-and-play linebackers do. We saw what plug-and-play safeties do, and it's not enough.
Yeah. Listen, you can't be putting a used Band-Aid over a gunshot wound expecting it to hold. They need to really focus on that position, because, listen, you take a look at the remaining teams in this playoff, linebacker is a key focus on probably more than 70% of those teams.
I mean, the best linebacker on the Texans is their head coach.
Blake Cashman's very, very good.
Yes, but DeMeco Ryans is sensational. So he thinks like a linebacker. He's still running the team.
A great linebacker. You have the 49ers have their linebackers.
Oh, God.
Greenlaw. You have Queen and
Wagner and Fred Wagner. Hold on. They got two.
Yeah, Wagner and Greenlaw.
All right.
Or Warner and Greenlaw. Wagner's on the Seahawks. Fred Warner and Greenlaw. You have Roquan Smith and Patrick Queen on the Ravens. You have, Willie Gay and Nick Bolton on the Chiefs. The linebacker.
The Bills have Von Miller, who's that combination edge and linebacker.
The Bills have Milano, unfortunately.
Who did get hurt.
But listen, it's
Green Bay. They're just in it.
Green Bay's Devondre Campbell, another good linebacker.
So did we do every team?
The Lions have, they drafted Jack Campbell in the first round. They have Alex Anzalone, who's played really well.
And the
last team
Bucks.
and the Bucks have Devin White and Levante David.
So there you go. All remaining teams have a linebacker.
Yeah. And also, Quay Walker.
Max, good point.
Yeah, Quay Walker is very good, Georgia Bulldog in Green Bay. So
if that doesn't tell you everything that you need to know, that linebackers are essential to a defense, there you go.
Yeah, listen, you need to. You can't do what the Eagles did, unfortunately.
And we rolled out Nicholas Morrow.
Yeah, Nick Morrow, and Zach Cunningham. Listen, Zach Cunningham is what he is. There's a reason he was available that late in the.
He did a very serviceable job.
Yeah, he did very serviceable job, but that at the end of the year he had that knee issue that he didn't play for a couple of games, and he just
never recovered from it. Right?
He just didn't look 100%. And the funny thing is what they really thought of Shaq Leonard, because I don't think he got one defensive snap on Monday, and Nick Morrow looked pretty bad on a couple occasions there. So it tells you what you need to hear about that. Unfortunately, I hate it for the guy because he was once, such a stud linebacker and a talent. But unfortunately, injuries and just took its toll. And that is what it is. But yeah, we're going to be getting into some of the offseason stuff. We'll see what comes with the offseason here with the Eagles and the head coaching, and then possibly the offensive and defensive coordinator searches. So it's going to be fun. It's going to be interesting. Got a lot of fun topics planned as well when we get into the spring and summer months. To kind of get some fun shows together. But hey, it sucks, but off to 2024 and the off season begins. But with that, we'll end it on 2 words that we always say. Go Birds.
Yeah. Okay.
This is Matt Ware. Hey, for all the Eagle content you need, go follow All About the Birds. They do a damn thing. Check them out.
Hey, Eagles fans, I may be in Tampa, but I know where to find the best Eagles content out there. Check out my friends at All About the Birds.
Philadelphia, what's up? This your boy Freddie Mitchell, a.k.a. Fred X. It's all about the bird.
All birds all the time. All birds all the time.
All About the Birds provides you with weekly analysis, game recaps, informative interviews, and it's all birds all the time.